This is going to be a video about custom item data. Items do not replicate the normal way because they're not actors. They're basically glorified data containers. And because of this, replicated variables, events, and etc. do not function. Wildcard added custom item data so we can utilize a way of sharing data between the server and the client. It basically stores data on the item and it's shared with the clients after items initialize. Because items are not actors, they initialize very frequently. If you throw it on the floor or pick it up or craft one or equip one or unequip one, the item reinitializes and any data that needs to be shared is shared with the client. We will be exploring the system in this video. We're going to be making custom weapons. I saw a video before and they called them Slayer weapons. I think it's a pretty accurate name. And these will be weapons that imprint on the class that you first kill and will increase the damage only to that class for each subsequent kill you make on that class. So for example, you could have a bow of dodo death or something like that. The more dodos you kill, the more damage it does to dodos, but just to dodos. Otherwise it does base damage to all other actor classes. We'll have it update the item description so you can tell what dino or character class it's for, how many kills it has, and anything else custom that you might want on the item description. We'll also have it change the name so that it, again, says something like, Dodo Bow of Death or something along the lines. We'll need to create a Singleton to handle kill events, since there's no other real dependable way of getting when something died, who killed it and what it was, etc. And a damage type, so that we can adjust how much damage we're doing based on the character class. So first things first is we're going to be making some base classes. This is so that we can make children of those base classes without having to redo any of the logic. So once we make one weapon, we can make another one very quickly. We need a new item. In this case, we'll just find something like a metal hatchet and we'll just copy those files. We're going to copy the primal item, the weapon for it, and then its damage type. These will be our base classes. In this case, we only need to make a base class for the item and the damage type. The weapon we don't need, but we'll use it for our custom weapon in a minute. Try to give them sensible names so that you can distinguish between base classes and subsequent child classes. Just change some on here so that we know what they are in case we get confused later. No one will ever see these anyways, so it doesn't totally matter. Now we're going to need a few things. We will need the use BP initialize item. This is a function that needs to be turned on, and we'll use this in a minute. We also need to use functions for the description. Use BP get item description, and the item name. Use BP get item name. Now with all those enabled, we will just go and implement those functions. And for the initialize, we want to post initialize. BP post initialize item. Remember, since items initialize all the time, on clients and on servers, we can use this to read the custom item data off of our item if it exists in the first place. I'll be going about the order in this a little bit, almost backwards, I suppose. But it's just so that it is a little bit clearer, so we're not bouncing between all the blueprints all the time. So we'll just have to make a few assumptions at first. So the custom item data it's pretty clear. There's get custom item data. And you look for a specific data name, which you can specify to be whatever you want. So we'll just call it layer weapon. And does it exist? So if there's custom item data, it means we've saved something onto this item that we'll use for whatever purposes. And if there's not, we'll do nothing. So if there is, we can pull the data off. These are just generic. They don't have to contain anything. But if you've written something to the item data, one of these has something in there, even if it's just a name. So in our case, we're going to be saving the dino class that we've killed and the amount of kills that we have for that dino class. And since there's no int on this custom item data, we'll use a float for an int instead. So we'll pull off of the float and the classes. And if this is valid, just in case, this is one of those, it's probably unnecessary, but it can't hurt scenarios. Then we'll save this. Sorry, we'll make it an int, just for clarity. Now again, to reiterate, this variable will be saved right now. But if you were then to turn around and take the item and throw it on the floor, it will get erased, but this whole function will run all over again. If you want to test this, just stick a print right here, and then go toss around the item in the world. You'll see exactly what I mean. If this is valid, again, probably unnecessary. This will be the actor class that we've killed previously. So it's going to be a character, like a player, or a dino class. So we can use primal character, which is the parent class to both dinos and players. So this way we can have a slayer weapon for humans or dinos, but nothing else, whatever that might be. And that's all we need in this post item initialize function, for the moment at least. You can hide this if you want, doesn't hurt anything. Now we're going to use the get item name function. This will override the default name that you'll find in here, Slayer base item, and it will change it to whatever this return is. So we can use get custom item data, and if it exists, it means this is a Slayer weapon with some character class and some kill counter on it. Remember, use the exact same name we used previously. If you typo this, you'll run into all sorts of fun issues. If it doesn't exist, it means it's still just on default, and we want the item name to be returned. Otherwise, we can pull our data off of the struct, and we can get the character class. We can get the class default object. So we can get the type of dodo, the name of it, sorry, the type of dino or character, and cast to primal dino, sorry, primal character, so we can include the player classes. And we can get the descriptive name. So this would be a dodo, a raptor, a player, that kind of thing. And we'll make a new return node. And we'll just put something like character class, and the space and the name. So it could be something like Dodo's Slayer Dagger or something. And that's all we need in here. We'll go edit the description. This works largely the same way. It will override the description of the item that you would find in here, the item description, with whatever the return value is. So since we've set the Slayer class on the Initialize function, we can check this. If it's empty, it means it hasn't been set yet, or it doesn't exist, in which case we just want to return the default description. Otherwise, we can get the class default object, cast a primal character, get the descriptive name again, and we'll build something like the original description, some spaces, the Slayer class, I suppose. And then the amount of kills. And we'll use that as the description on the item. So the original description, you can use whatever you want for it. So in this case, it's just used off of the metal hatchet, sharp metal hatchet, blah, blah, blah. For new lines, we want the get new line character. This is so it's not just a wall of text. We can get, oh, I'm sorry, I attached this wrong. The descriptive name goes in there, and kill counter will go in here. Next, we're going to be editing the damage function. This will be done on the damage type that will attach to our weapon. We want to make sure that use BPAdjust damage is turned on. And then we'll implement the function on the damage type. BPAdjust damage. So this is the damage that will be applied, but hasn't been applied yet. So after a bunch of calculations, this is what it comes up with. You have the victims, a damage event, incoming damage, etc., etc. And we can make some alterations based on the weapon and the class that it's going to hit and the amount of kills that are on our primal item. Make sure you always return a value, even if it's just 0, but that would mean you're doing no damage to things. We're going to get the event instigator for this function. You can also just pull off the pin, but it makes lots of lines. This is the controller of whoever's doing the damage, which will always be a player for us. So because of that, we can get the character from the controller. And then we can get their current weapon. Players always have a current weapon, because even if you're disarmed, you still have fists and they count as weapons. And then we can check the primal item associated with that weapon. If it's not valid, it means it's something that doesn't have an item, in which case it's not a Slayer weapon, and we don't care. I did forget one thing on the item, just for sanity's sake, or to make things a little bit easier, I suppose. I'm going to put tags on our weapons, our items, I should say, to make it easier to determine if they're actually Slayer weapons or not, without checking base classes or anything like that. So custom tag Slayer weapon on our primal item. Back on our damage type, we can check the custom tag on the associated primal item if it's valid. getting custom tag and checking if it equals Slayer weapon. If it doesn't, we don't care. And if it does, we want to get the custom item data off of the weapon. I should say we should check if it exists, because it still might not. If it doesn't exist, it doesn't have a class that it's designed to kill, or no counters, in which case, again, we don't care. If it does, we can get the class out of there, and the kill count. And we can compare the class that we've saved to the victim class that this damage is being applied to. And if it's the same class, it means we have a weapon that's designed to do extra damage on whatever this damage type is attacking. So dodos, for example. And if it's not, we don't care, because the end result will still just return this damage, since we haven't changed it yet. We can do this a little bit easier. We don't even need this branch. If the classes are the same, we'll do A, and we'll return some augmented damage. Otherwise, we just want the default damage. And in this case, we'll just do something kind of silly. We'll do like the damage times however many kills we've saved in there. So if we've killed 3 dodos, we'll do 3 times the damage, etc. This will get out of control kind of quick, but it'll demonstrate it pretty clearly. So for the damage, if there's a weapon, which there always will be, and it has an associated item, which might not be the case with fists or other things like that, we'll continue. If it's a Slayer weapon, we'll continue. If it has saved data on it, we'll continue. And if the saved class is the same as the victim class, we'll change the damage to the default damage times however many kills have been saved onto the weapon, onto the item. Otherwise, we'll use the default damage. You could do this a little bit differently here. You could compare if it's a child class, so that if you attack, say, raptors, it will affect child raptors and anything else that's also considered as a raptor. But just for demonstrations, we'll just keep this simple and have a strict class comparison. Now, so far, we've been using custom item data, assuming it's actually been set, but we've never actually set anything on it yet, because we haven't handled any killing events to determine when we've killed a dino or a character, and then what to do with that. There's a few ways, but some are more convoluted than others, and one of them makes it really simple, although it fires a little frequently, but we'll use it just because it's pretty clear. We'll need a singleton for this, or you can make another one, or if you already have one, which we do, we'll just use that. We'll just move this out of the way and we'll stick it on here. The important part is with your singleton, if it's replicated, you want to make sure that this runs off of an authority pin, because we need to use the shooter game mode. Off of the shooter game mode pin, there is a killed event. This will fire a dispatcher every single time anything is killed. If a dino kills a dino, if a player kills a dino, if a dino kills a player, if a player kills a player, etc., this will fire. Like I said, it can fire a little frequently because of that, but it's really useful because all sorts of data attached to it. And actually, we're going to get this out of the graph. We're going to create an event, create a function, just to get it off the graph, clean things up a bit, keep it a little more sensible. Rename it to something not stupid. So first things first is we want the killer, which is the killer pin. This is the controller of whatever killed something else. So it could be a Dino AI controller or a player controller or maybe other controllers, whatever. We can just pull off of here and is player controller. And if it's not, we don't care because we are only worrying about player kills since the weapons will be in player hands. And off of that, we can get our player and their weapon and the item. Again, valid check it in case it's not valid. If it's like fists or what have you. We'll get the tag off of it again. And check what that is. See if it's a Slayer weapon. It's usually best to copy and paste these things in case you don't remember the tags or you make typos. Now we'll check who we killed, which is the killed pawn pin. We'll get the class and make sure it is a primal character. Anything else we don't care about. This only applies to dinos and players. Now off the item, we can get the custom item data if it exists. Again, tags. And then we can pull off, get the class and the kills. If the class matches the killed pawn class, it means that the tag or the saved class on the weapon is the same as the character that was killed. So if you killed a dodo and this is a dodo, they'll be equal. In which case, we want to increase the amount of kills that are stored on our weapon so that it increases damage again and again and again. If the classes aren't the same, we don't care. Now, since we know this is a Slayer weapon, what happens if there's no custom item data on it? Well, we want to put custom item data on it because we know something just died and it's a Slayer weapon. So you should be assigning a new class to it. So the first time you use this to kill something, like a dodo, we want to make sure that it now is for dodos only. So we can get the the primal item, the associated primal item for the weapon, and set custom item data on it. If there's none on already. Again, tags. And we only want two things. The number of kills, which we know doesn't exist yet, but it will now be 1. And the class of the character that you killed. The killed pawn class. In this case, do not hide unconnected pins. It will clear the data name pin, and then you'll be saving nothing onto the item, and you'll get confused and lost. Now there's item data on our item, but the client won't know about it until it's been replicated. So if you do this, you're saving the data, but no one knows about it because Reinitialize won't fire. It will only fire if you throw the item on the floor or pick it up or move it around or something. Or if you pull off the item and call updated item. So this down here is for first kills only. If we already have a class and it's the same as the character that we just killed, we want to increase the kill counter on the item data. We still want to set item data on here. And we still want to update. Tags, always the tags. So we can get the previous classes, stick it back in there. And this is the previous kills. So it would be something like 1 or 57 or however many dodos you've killed, I suppose. And we'll just increase it by 1. And add it in there. So on the Singleton, when something dies, we don't know what it is. We're getting basic things out of the way first. Did a player do the killing? If not, just stop and do nothing else. Otherwise, continue. We then get their weapon and make sure that it has an item. If it doesn't have an item, it can't be a Slayer weapon. We don't care. Is it a Slayer weapon? Yes. Did you kill a primal character? Yes. Is there custom item data on the item? Perhaps not, but maybe. If no, we will put in the character that we just killed, their class, the amount of kills that are on the weapon, which is now 1 because there wasn't any before, and then we'll save it. If there was a class on there, and it's the same class of the one you killed versus the one that you saved, we will increase the counter for the number of kills. Set it on the item and update. The damage type for our weapons will have the default damage. We'll check if there's a primal item in the player's hands, if it's a Slayer weapon, and if it has data. If it doesn't have data, we don't do anything else, and it will end up returning the default damage. If there is data, we will increase the damage it does by the default one times the number of kills if the classes are the same, the victim versus the saved data. That's what select float does. If this equation is true, so if the class equals the class of the victim, it does A, damage times the number of kills. Otherwise, damage, and then it sets it to our local damage variable, which gets returned as the output damage. Always make sure you have the functions enabled, lots of them, especially ones starting with BP, have enabling bools, otherwise they will not fire. In our primal item, again, same thing, enabling bools, initialize, item description, item name. This handles the description, and it just changes it dynamically based on whether or not there is a Slayer class. Item name does much the same. Changes the name based on whether or not there's any custom item data on the item. And the initialize function is what sets the variables in the first place. If there's custom item data, get the kills, set it to kill counter, get the class, set it to Slayer class. So those are our base classes done, and our Singleton adjusted with the on-killed dispatcher from game mode. We copied the metal hatchet weapon blueprint earlier. We didn't do anything with it, and now we'll make a weapon, just for example, and then we'll make another one after that just to show you how fast it is. So this will be a weapon metal hatchet Slayer. It will need an item to attach to it so that you can equip it. Create a child. And we're going to make a child of the damage type too. I'll make a subfolder just for organizations. So we'll open our item first. Actually, we renamed it something stupid, so we'll fix that. It's not a base. Same with this, it's not a base. We'll open our item. Look for weapon template. Or is it web template? Weapon template. And this is where our child of the hatchet will go. Or is it a copy? Copy of the hatchet will go. We'll open our weapon. And we'll look for damage type. And this is where our child damage type of our Slayer base will go. Do cosmetic things. We can take our metal hatchet and rename it to something not Slayer base item, just like a Slayer hatchet. I'll leave the description. Again, put whatever you want. And that should be it. We'll spawn one in. This is the primitive Slayer hatchet. Looks totally normal. We'll go kill some dodos. Now it says it's a dodo primitive Slayer hatchet. Should probably take the qualities out so it doesn't look silly. Again, pretty cosmetic. And you can see that there's a Slayer class, misspelled because I can't type, and the number of kills. And now we'll chase down some dodos. We've killed 3 of them. And if you watch the damage, that did 96. That did 128. 160. It'll just keep going up and up and up. The more damage we do, the more kills we get. The faster we get kills, the more damage we do, etc. Obviously, you'd want to put a limit on this and probably control how much increase each kill does. That's pretty simple to do. You can just change our formula on the damage in the Slayer base. This is the number of kills, and this is the number of damage of the weapon. You could just do something like the damage plus a 20% a kill or 10% a kill, whatever you want. We'll do another one real quick. We'll make a bow since it involves more moving parts. We need projectiles and such. We still want the damage type, and we still want the item that are children. Remember, these are children. We use children so we don't have to recreate all the logic that's on them every single time we make more weapons. We can just make a child, move them over here, and all the functionality that's on here is automatically applied on our child. Same with on the item. There's no need to redo all this, or all this, or all this, or all this on any subsequent items that we make. We can just make children of the items into our new folder, the item and the damage type, and then copy or child the files for the new weapons that we want, and then apply these to them. So for a bow, we're going to need the weapon, which is probably wep bow. It is. There's tons, all the different arrow types. I'm not getting into that. It's a mess. We will just, actually we'll create a child. Probably doesn't matter one way or the other, but move that over there. We'll need the projectile, which is, I'm not sure what it's called. Open up our weapon bow. Look for projectile. Proj arrow under projectile class. Again, we'll make a child of that. Now we want a custom projectile because the projectile is actually going to do the damage. And since we have a custom damage type, we need to change the damage on the arrow, not on the weapon. As you can see here, damage type under our projectile. We don't want that one. We want ours. Save and compile. On our weapon, we want to change the projectile class out to our new one that we just child. Projectile arrow flare. Enclose our metal hatchet. We don't need that. Or that. We want our item for our bow. And again, weapon template. Change it to our bow. And I do believe that's it. I didn't change the name. I didn't change the icon either. Should probably do that, otherwise we'll be confused. Just look for bow real quick. That'll do. Don't want that. There's our primitive Slayer bow. Still shoot the arrows. Go shoot a dodo. The Slayer class dodo, 1 kill. Dodo primitive Slayer bow. And as you can tell, the damage is going up and up. But this is why I said you should put limits. It'll get insane quick. Now, just to show you that it's not actually doing damage to other classes, in case we made mistakes, we'll just find like a parasaur. So we'll shoot this thing. 44 damage. Still 44 damage. But when we shoot dodos, lots and lots. So just as a little recap, we'll bind to the game mode on our Singleton on the killed event. When something dies, if the killer was a player, if they had a weapon, and the tag on the weapon was our Slayer weapon, we'll get whoever we killed, their class. We'll check the custom item data on the weapon and make sure it's a Slayer weapon or that it exists. If it is a Slayer weapon, if it doesn't exist yet, but the tag on the weapon is Slayer weapon, we've killed something for the first time. We will save the class of the killed pawn and the number of kills we have, which is now 1, onto the item, and we'll update. Otherwise, if the class that's saved on the item is the same as the killed pawn class, it means we've killed something of the same class of the Slayer weapon. So we will increase the count on the item onto the item, custom item data, and save it. And that's all the CCA does. the item or the getName function will override the name of the item if there's a custom item data tag on the item that's Slayer weapon, in which case we'll get the class of the killed dino or character, the descriptive name, and we'll write that into the item name. This is how we get Dodo Slayer, etc. Item description is much the same. It reads the Slayer class variable, which was saved in the Initialize function. If it's not nothing, if it is nothing, we'll use the default description. If it isn't nothing, that means there's a value there of a primal character, in which case we'll get the descriptive name and we'll save some data onto the item in the description. That would be our Slayer class that I can't type, and the Slayer count, the number of dinos of that class that we've killed. This is just for descriptive sake, so we can keep track of how many kills we have with our cool bow or hatchet or what have you. A few things in the defaults. You want to make sure you enable the Initialize function, the getItemDescription function, and the getItemName function. We also want a custom tag on the item for our Slayer weapon. Everything else is cosmetic. The item icon, the descriptive name, description, etc., etc. For the damage blueprint, all we need is BPAdjust damage. And in there, we'll check the item to make sure it's a Slayer weapon. If there's custom item data, compare the class of that to the victim class. And if they're the same, increase the damage, in this case, extremely, by the number of kills of that class that are saved onto the item. Otherwise, return the default damage. And then that gets returned at the end. After that, you're just linking up your damage type, your primal item, and your weapon so that your item equips the weapon has the damage type does all this. Or in the case of bows and probably lots of other weapons, the item equips the weapon shoots a projectile, the projectile has the damage type, and then the same thing occurs. It might be a little bit much. It's not actually that complicated. You just have to realize that with items specifically, they don't replicate normally. You have to use the Initialize functions. You don't have to use the post one. There are others. Pre-initialize as an example. There's also this item net info one, which I do believe is for the engram screen, which usually doesn't matter for people. But either way, the post-initialize item will fire frequently and often on server and client, and that is where you can read the custom item data from the item itself. And if you want to see just how often they do actually fire, we'll do that real quick here. You can see it's firing lots and lots. I'll turn off all of these so you can see it better. Lots and lots. So if you take the bow and just throw it on the floor and it fires, if you pick it up and it fires again and again, if it's equipment, it will fire when you equip it here or when you pull it out. It fires when you take it off the hotbar, when you put it back on. Fires all the time. So because of that, anytime you update the item data on the item, you don't really have to worry about when it's going to update next. But for sake of making it really obvious, updated item is fired, which forces that reinitialize so that we can update our item descriptions and item names without having to throw it on the floor. So it's a much better user experience.